McQuestion, for over 28 years talking about things that matter with people who care. Production of McQuestion is made possible in part by individual viewers, supporters of the Foundation for Responsible Television, the University of Texas at Dallas, creating the future.
Do Texas taxpayers need to be spending more money on our K-12 schools? And does more money equal better student outcomes? What is the true state of education in Texas schools compared to others around the country that spend more? What about our property tax controversy? And finally, how do you feel about incentive pay for teachers? Well, hopefully I have your attention if you're a taxpayer or a parent or a student. So let's meet the experts who can help us understand all these issues. And first, on my left, Professor Stan Leibowitz. He teaches economics at the Jindal School of Management, the University of Texas at Dallas, where he's also involved with the Colloquium for the Advancement of Free Enterprise Education. He's written 5 books and dozens of academic articles, plus writing for the Reason magazine and the Wall Street Journal. And Stan, you recently published something in this K-12 education rankings, and I saw that, I think, in Reason magazine, and I think the whole thing was done for Cato, is that right?
That's right. The long version was for Cato, the more academic version. Reason did a 3-page, 5-page version of it. Also made it a cover story. So
yeah. Well, and of course, I read the abstracts, so there we are. So thank you very much for the short version. And sitting next to you is Dr. David Vrunland. He's currently serves as superintendent of schools for the Mesquite Independent School District. During his 33 years of service in education, he's taught in Texas, Maryland, and Japan, in districts ranging from fast to low growth and from property wealthy to property poor, giving him a lot of perspectives on school funding. So David, welcome to the program.
Thank you, it's very good to be here.
There is a very good chance that that viewer does not really know much about the factual situation on school funding in Texas, in spite of the fact that it's in the newspapers almost every day, especially with the legislature in session now. Give us some history, if you will, about what this is all about and why we have this continuing controversy over funding.
Well, if I may, I want to kind of go back a little bit and just understand our purpose. I think you always have to start with that in mind. And Thomas Jefferson in 1810 wrote of public education, or a general education. Its purpose was to enable every man to determine for himself that which will secure or endanger their freedom. I think as we look at what we try to do, we have to always keep that in mind. I think in today's world, we seem to center around college and career readiness, and there's nothing wrong with that, mind you. But I think in the long run, we have to recognize that there's both a corporate interest, if you will, in public education, how we're going to do as a whole, but also individually, how we're working to advance children so that they're in control of the quality of their freedom when they graduate from our high schools and move on into whatever, prospective opportunities they have in life. I think today what has happened has been an interesting transition from our beginnings. I mean, you got to go back. We really are fairly new at this. I mean, it seems like a long time in terms of perspective, but you got to realize that it was not until the 1890s that we started even designing the system we're in today, and we didn't even start really kind of putting it in place until after World War II. So, I mean, there's just a lot that's been going on. One of the things that happened in Texas that's not similar in every state, however, is we shifted rather from an income tax system to pay for public schools. We went to a property tax system. And that may have seemed like a good idea. I would argue, just from my perspective, that's a regressive tax process, and it hurts the middle class probably more than anyone else. But what ends up happening is that we fund our public schools through two basic buckets. A state bucket where they collect dollars through various taxes, business taxes and oil and all that kind of stuff, sales taxes. And then at our level, it's strictly property tax. We've had problems over the last many years, and I really want to go back to '06 when they compressed the tax rate. They compressed the M&O tax rate from $1.50 to $1 in '06.
That compressed what kind of rate now?
We were at $1.50 for maintenance and operation.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that. I do that pretty easily.
It sounded like a railroad, but right? I'm not sure. Right?
It feels like a railroad sometimes.
Right.
But the tax rate was compressed, and the state said they would guarantee the difference. At the time, the state was probably around 57% of the contribution to public schools, and then the rest was localized dollars, generalized across the state, obviously. Then in '09, and we were warned by this by our comptroller at the time, Carol Keaton Strayhorn. She warned us about this. She said the dollars will not be there. to fulfill the difference between the compressed tax rate and what we were doing. She was actually right. There was about a $5 billion loss, and the only thing that saved us was the stimulus money from the Obama administration in 2009. It filled that bucket. But then in 2011, those monies weren't there anymore, and we had a $5 billion hole.
All right, let me stop you there for a second. I want you to finish that. But why weren't the monies there?
Because the economy wasn't turning. As you know, it was right around 2008 where the economy started turning, and we had a downturn in the economy. And so when
so property values went down, property taxes
slowed.
went down.
Yeah, they slowed.
But the state wasn't funding because of their tax issues as well?
Correct. And the system wasn't structured to collect taxes. They had reduced a lot of their means for collecting taxes. And as I said, the comptroller at the time knew that was going to happen. What has been difficult is since that time, we still haven't recovered those monies fully. Of course, this session, as you know, House Bill 3, we likely will recover those dollars finally and then some. But what ended up happening was as our property values went up in our local districts, including Mesquite ISD, the 3 years I've been in Mesquite ISD, we've almost averaged 10% a year in value increases. We've had some great economic influence into the city of Mesquite, including Ashley Furniture and some other big box kind of things. And so it's been a good boon to our economy, but it's forced our taxpayers to have to pay more. And you would think, well, then the school district should be able to lower.
We should have plenty of money then, right?
We should have plenty of money.
But
the state, in equal part, reduced their share to us. And so we end up essentially flat. We get a few more dollars, but it's not enough to account for increases in health care. It's not enough to account for increases in inflation. It's not enough to account for increases in resource costs. I mean, significant problems for school districts because the state essentially is reducing their share as the local property taxpayer is increasing their share.
And why is that?
It's the way the system's designed. And that's not even Robin Hood. We're not a recapture district, so don't misunderstand that as Robin Hood. We get more dollars from the state than we get from our local taxpayer. But the result is my taxpayer is looking at me going, wait a minute, I'm paying more. Why can't you reduce it? And it's because essentially the state takes away their equal share.
All right, now you mentioned Robin Hood. As last I checked, that was a book and probably several movies that we made.
It does involve theft.
There's probably one viewer who's saying, Robin Hood, why are we talking about Robin Hood? We did a television program on Robin Hood maybe, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago.
Right.
I mean, what is Robin Hood? You guys get money, but let's just take Plano and Frisco. I assume they probably give it. So tell us about that.
It's recapture, really, in the way we talk about it. But out on the street, everyone calls it Robin Hood. It's basically taking from the rich and giving to the poor districts. It's a redistribution of the dollars through the taxing system is what it amounts to. And so Plano has to give X amount of dollars, and I honestly don't know their formula, but they have to give X amount of dollars back to the state, which is then redistributed out. But here's the thing that the local taxpayers don't understand and should really bother them. Even though I'm not recapture, essentially I am, as I just explained to you, as my tax values go up, the state simply reduces their share to the tune across the state last biennium of $3.5 billion. And that did not go back into public ed. So they're recapturing it and using it for the purposes of general fund rather than into public ed. And that has been a frustration point for superintendents and school boards across the state of Texas. The end result has been since 2006, we've really only increased spending roughly, and increase is not the right term, but about a rate of about 2%, give or take.
A year?
And actually in
Which
inflationary,
is not much different from the inflation rate.
It's actually less. In inflationary costs, we actually are $200 less per student